My name is Ethan Brooks. I'm 52 years old, and for over 2 decades I've worked as a commercial real estate broker in Phoenix, Arizona. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest. I've closed deals on strip malls, office buildings, warehouses. I've shaken hands with developers, investors, small business owners trying to make it, and every dollar I earned went toward building something I thought was unshakable, a stable home for my wife and our 2 kids. Grace and I got married when we were both in our late 20s. Back then, she had this energy about her, this warmth. We had Liam first, then Ella 2 years later. For a long time, things felt right. I worked long hours, sure, but I came home to a family. Dinner together, bedtime stories, weekend trips to the Grand Canyon or Sedona. Normal stuff. The kind of life you don't question because it feels solid. But somewhere along the way, things shifted. Grace started going out more. Book clubs, wine nights, Pilates classes that somehow always ran late. She bought new clothes, started wearing perfume I didn't recognize, and when I'd ask about her day, she'd give me one-word answers and scroll through her phone like I wasn't even there. I'm not an idiot. I knew something was off, but I told myself it was just a phase. Maybe she needed space. Maybe I'd been working too much. So I tried harder. I planned date nights. I asked her what she needed. And every time she'd brush me off with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and say, "I'm fine, Ethan. You worry too much." Then, in March of 2024, I found a hotel receipt in the pocket of her jacket. The Arizona Biltmore. A Friday night when she'd told me she was at her friend Monica's place in Scottsdale. I stood there in our laundry room, staring at that slip of paper, and something inside me went cold. Not angry, not hurt, just cold. I didn't confront her. I didn't throw the receipt in her face or demand an explanation. Instead, I did what I do best. I gathered information. I called a private investigator named Olivia. She came highly recommended by a divorce attorney I knew from a deal I'd worked on years back. Olivia was in her 40s, sharp as a blade, and she didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You want to know if your wife's cheating," she said during our first meeting at a coffee shop near Camelback Mountain. It wasn't a question. "Yes. And if she is, you want proof." "Everything you can get," she nodded once. "I'll need 2 weeks, maybe 3. Don't change your behavior at home. Don't ask her questions. Act normal. Can you do that?" I could, and I did. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists like this video, and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. 3 weeks later, Olivia handed me a folder at the same coffee shop. Inside were photos, text message screenshots, bank statements, and a timeline that made my stomach turn. Grace wasn't just having an affair. She was having 3 of them. 3 different men. A personal trainer named Kyle she'd met at the gym, a guy named Derek who worked in marketing and lived in Tempe, and some tech consultant named Brad who traveled to Phoenix every other week for work. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the money. Over the past 8 months, Grace had been slowly draining our joint accounts. Small transfers at first, 500 here, 1,000 there. Nothing that would trigger an alert, but it added up. She'd moved over $200,000 into accounts under her mother's name. Janet, my mother-in-law, the woman who smiled at me every Thanksgiving and told me how lucky Grace was to have me. I sat in my truck in that parking lot for an hour, staring at those documents. My hands felt numb, my chest felt hollow, but my mind was clear. And then I made a decision. I wasn't going to explode. I wasn't going to scream or beg or ask her why. I was going to do this the right way, the smart way. I called Catherine Reeves. If Olivia was a scalpel, Catherine was a sledgehammer wrapped in Chanel. She'd been practicing family law in Arizona for over 20 years, and she had a reputation for being ruthless in court. We met at her office in downtown Phoenix the next day. "You've got everything you need here," she said, flipping through Olivia's file. "Infidelity, financial fraud, this is open and shut." "I want full custody of the kids," I said, "and I want her to pay back every cent." Catherine looked at me over her reading glasses. "You'll get both." But here's my advice. Don't tip your hand. Let her think she's in control. Let her make the first move. When someone thinks they've already won, they get sloppy. And that's when we bury them. So that's exactly what I did. For 4 months, I played the part. I went to work, I came home, I asked Grace about her day. I smiled at her mother during Sunday dinners. I took the kids to school. I coached Liam's Little League team. I helped Ella with her homework. And the whole time, I was building a case that would leave Grace with nothing. The hardest part wasn't the lying. It was watching my kids. Liam had started asking why Mommy was always on her phone. Ella had stopped asking Grace to read her bedtime stories because Mommy's always busy. And I knew that when this all came crashing down, they'd be caught in the middle. That's the only reason I didn't walk out sooner. I wanted to make sure that when the dust settled, they'd be safe. With me. In July 2024, Grace suggested we take a family trip. Something special, she said. Before summer ends. Maybe Charleston? My parents could meet us there. I agreed. I even acted excited about it. But I knew what she was really doing. She was setting the stage, building up to something. And I was ready. We flew into Charleston in mid-August 2024. Grace had booked us a rental house in the historic district, one of those old southern homes with wraparound porches and ceiling fans that barely moved the humid air. The August air clung to your skin like syrup. Her parents, Walter and Janet, drove down from Charlotte and arrived the day after us. Walter was a retired accountant, the kind of guy who wore polo shirts tucked into khaki shorts and kept a calculator in his car's glove compartment. Janet was all smiles and sweet tea, but I'd learned enough in the past few months to know exactly what kind of person she really was. The first few days were fine. We did the tourist things, walked along the Battery, took the kids to the aquarium, had shrimp and grits at restaurants where the waiters called you darling and the prices made your eyes water. Grace played the perfect wife. She held my hand during walks, laughed at my jokes, took family photos in front of rainbow-colored houses on East Bay Street. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed it was real. But I did know better, and every smile she gave me felt like a countdown. On our last night in Charleston, Grace made reservations at a place called Magnolia's, an upscale restaurant near the old marketplace. "Let's make it special," she said, "the whole family together." Walter and Janet met us there at 7. We got a table near the window overlooking the street. Liam and Ella were excited because the menu had a section just for kids with pictures of shrimp boats and pelicans. The dinner started normally enough. We ordered appetizers, she-crab soup for the adults, fried green tomatoes. Walter talked about a fishing trip he was planning. Janet complimented Grace's dress, some flowy blue thing she'd bought specifically for this trip. I ordered a bourbon, neat. Grace had wine. The kids had lemonade and were coloring on the paper placemats the restaurant provided. Then, right after the main course arrived, Grace set down her fork and cleared her throat. "I have something I need to say," she announced. The table went quiet. Walter looked up from his grouper. Janet's smile flickered but held. Liam stopped coloring. Ella looked at her mother with those big brown eyes that reminded me so much of my own mother. "Ethan," Grace said, looking directly at me. Her voice was calm, too calm. "I've been thinking about this for a long time and I've made a decision. I've met someone else, someone who makes me happy. And I think it's time we end this marriage. It's over." The words hung there in the air like smoke. I could hear the restaurant around us, the clink of silverware, a burst of laughter from another table, a waiter asking someone if they wanted more water. But at our table there was nothing but silence. Liam's face crumpled. "What?" he whispered. Ella looked confused. "Mommy, what does that mean?" Janet reached across the table toward Grace's hand, but Walter just sat there, frozen, his fork halfway to his mouth. Grace didn't look at the kids. She kept her eyes on me, waiting for me to react, waiting for me to beg, maybe, or yell, or fall apart right there in front of everyone. Instead, I reached into the inside pocket of my blazer and pulled out a manila envelope. I'd been carrying it with me for 3 days, waiting for this exact moment. I placed it on the table between us, right next to the breadbasket, and slid it slowly across the white tablecloth toward her. "You should open that," I said quietly. Grace frowned. "What is this?" "Open it." She picked up the envelope, her manicured nails catching the light from the candle on the table. She tore it open and pulled out the papers inside. I watched her face as she read the first page, then the second. The color drained from her cheeks. Her hands started to shake. "What is this?" she said again, but this time her voice cracked. "Divorce papers," I said calmly. "Already filed with the Maricopa County Superior Court 4 days ago. You'll also find evidence of your 3 affairs: Kyle Martinez, Derek Sullivan, Brad Kemp. There are photos, text messages, hotel receipts, all of it documented and submitted to my attorney." Walter leaned forward. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" I didn't take my eyes off Grace. "Keep reading, page 6. She flipped through the pages, and I saw the moment she hit the bank statements. Her face went from pale to gray. "Those are the records of every transfer you made from our joint accounts over the past 8 months, I continued. $214,000 to be exact, moved in small increments to accounts under your mother's name, Janet Brooks. Account numbers are listed there, along with dates and amounts. That's fraud, Grace, and since the accounts were joint, and since you transferred money without my knowledge or consent for personal use, that's also financial fraud and misappropriation under Arizona law." Janet's mouth fell open. "What? I don't know anything about—" "Yes, you do," I said, finally turning to look at her. "Your signatures are on the account opening documents. Olivia, the private investigator I hired, pulled them from the bank. You opened those accounts with Grace in March. You knew exactly what was happening." Walter grabbed the papers from Grace and started reading. His face went red, then purple. He was an accountant. He understood immediately what he was looking at, and what it meant. "Grace," he said slowly, "tell me this isn't real." She couldn't speak. She just sat there staring at the papers like they might burst into flames. I leaned back in my chair and took a sip of my bourbon. "This morning, my attorney filed an emergency motion to freeze all joint accounts pending the divorce proceedings. As of 9 a.m. today, you no longer have access to any of our money. Not the checking account, not the savings, not the investment accounts, nothing." "You can't do that," Grace whispered. "I already did, and I've also filed for full custody of Liam and Ella. Given the evidence of infidelity, financial fraud, and the fact that you've been prioritizing your affairs over your children for months, I don't think any judge in Arizona is going to have a problem granting that." Liam started crying. Ella looked terrified. I hated that they had to hear this. I hated that they were sitting there watching their mother fall apart. But Grace had chosen this moment. She'd wanted to humiliate me in front of her parents and our kids. She'd wanted to feel powerful. So I let her have exactly what she'd asked for. Walter stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "We're leaving." "Sit down, Walter," I said firmly. "We're not done." He sat. Not because I told him to, but because I think he realized there was more coming. I turned back to Grace. "You tried to take everything from me. The money I earned, the house I bought, the kids I've raised. You thought you could just walk away with half of everything and start over with one of your boyfriends while I picked up the pieces. But you made a mistake, Grace. You underestimated me." Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a cold, satisfying sense of control. "I gave you 23 years of my life," I said quietly. "I worked 60-hour weeks so you could stay home with the kids. I paid for this house, this trip, your car, your clothes, everything. And you repaid me by lying, cheating, and stealing. So now you're going to deal with the consequences." The waiter approached our table cautiously, clearly sensing the tension. "Is everything all right here, folks?" "We're fine," I said without looking at him. "Just bring the check." Grace finally found her voice. "Ethan, please, we can talk about this. We can work something out." "No," I said simply. "We can't. You made your choice, and I made mine." Walter folded the papers and set them down carefully like they were contaminated. He looked at his daughter with an expression I couldn't quite read. Disappointment, maybe, or disgust. "You did this?" he asked her. She didn't answer. Janet tried one last time. "Ethan, surely we can—" "Your daughter committed fraud, Janet, and you helped her. If you want to avoid criminal charges, I suggest you cooperate fully with my attorney and return every cent. Otherwise, I'll make sure the district attorney's office gets a copy of everything I have." I stood up, pulled out my wallet, and dropped $300 on the table. Enough to cover the meal and a generous tip for the waiter who'd had the misfortune of serving us. "Come on, kids," I said gently. "Let's go back to the house." Liam and Ella scrambled out of their seats and followed me without a word. As we walked out of that restaurant, I didn't look back, not once. Behind me, I could hear Grace starting to sob and Janet trying to console her. But I was already done. The bomb had been dropped. Now all I had to do was wait for the fallout. We flew back to Phoenix the next morning. Grace and her parents took a later flight. I didn't ask when, I didn't care. Liam and Ella were quiet on the plane, and I knew they were processing everything in their own way. When we got home, I made them mac and cheese, let them watch cartoons, and told them we'd talk about everything when they were ready. That night, Ella crawled into bed with me and cried herself to sleep. Liam stayed in his room with the door closed. It destroyed me to see them hurting, but I also knew that protecting them meant finishing what I'd started. The next week was a blur of legal proceedings. Catherine had filed for an emergency custody hearing, and the judge granted it within 72 hours. Given the evidence of Grace's affairs and financial misconduct, plus the fact that she'd announced her intention to leave the marriage in front of the children, the court had no problem giving me temporary full custody. Grace was granted supervised visitation every other weekend, pending the final divorce hearing. She tried to fight it. Her attorney, some guy named Mitchell Bradshaw, who practiced out of a strip mall in Glendale, filed motion after motion trying to unfreeze the accounts, trying to get joint custody, trying to paint me as the controlling husband who'd fabricated evidence. But Catherine destroyed every argument. The bank records were real, the photos were time-stamped and geotagged. The text messages had been pulled directly from Grace's phone by Olivia, who'd managed to create a digital backup of her phone's data during one of Grace's wine nights when she'd left it unattended at a restaurant. Everything was airtight. By late September 2024, Grace had moved out of our house and into a small apartment in Tempe. She was living off whatever money her mother could give her, which wasn't much, considering Janet was also facing potential charges for her role in the fraud. Walter, to his credit, had cut both of them off financially. He'd called me 2 days after we got back from Charleston and said, "I'm sorry, Ethan. I didn't know. If I had, I would have stopped it." I believed him. Walter was a straight arrow. His daughter apparently was not. The divorce moved forward quickly. Arizona is a no-fault state, but infidelity and fraud still matter when it comes to asset division and custody. Catherine made sure the judge saw everything. Grace's attorney tried to argue that the affairs were irrelevant to the financial split, but Catherine countered with the fact that Grace had used marital funds to pay for hotels, dinners, and gifts for her boyfriends. She'd even bought Kyle, the personal trainer, a Tag Heuer watch with money from our joint account. A $9,000 watch, for a guy she'd been sleeping with for 6 months. When that came out in court, I watched Grace sink lower in her chair. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Patricia Hernandez, looked at Grace over her glasses and said, "Mrs. Brooks, you are not making a compelling case for yourself." But the real bombshell came in late October 2024, just as we were finalizing the division of assets. I was at home one evening helping Liam with his math homework when someone knocked on the door. I opened it to find a man I'd never seen before standing on my porch. He was in his mid-30s wearing a golf shirt and jeans, and he looked uncomfortable. "Can I help you?" I asked. "Are you Ethan Brooks?" "I am." He hesitated, then said, "My name is Derek Sullivan. I think you know who I am." I did. Derek was one of Grace's affairs, the marketing guy from Tempe. I'd seen his face in Olivia's photos smiling at my wife across a table at some trendy restaurant in Old Town Scottsdale. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me so Liam wouldn't hear. "What do you want?" "I need to tell you something," he said, "and I don't think you're going to like it, but you deserve to know." I crossed my arms. Go ahead. Grace is pregnant. The words hit me like a freight train. I stood there staring at him, trying to process what he'd just said. For a moment, I felt the same cold numbness I'd felt the day I found that receipt. A strange, detached calm before the storm. How do you know? I finally asked. She told me, 2 weeks ago. She thought it was mine. Thought. He nodded. I had a paternity test done. I'm not the father. I felt something cold settle in my chest. If it's not yours, then whose is it? I don't know, but it's not mine. And it's not yours either, right? You two haven't been together in months. He was right. Grace and I hadn't had sex since early spring 2024, long before I'd found the hotel receipt, long before I'd hired Olivia. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Derek looked down at his shoes. Because she's trying to use the pregnancy to get sympathy. She's telling people she's scared, that she's alone, that you abandoned her when she needed you most. And I just thought you should know the truth. She's been lying to everyone, including me. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to thank him. Part of me wanted to punch him in the face for being stupid enough to get involved with a married woman in the first place. But mostly I just felt tired. Thanks for letting me know, I said finally. He nodded and walked back to his car, a black Audi parked on the street. I watched him drive away, then went back inside. Liam was still at the kitchen table, chewing on his pencil and frowning at his worksheet. Who was that? He asked. Nobody important, I said. The next morning I called Catherine and told her what Derek had said. She was silent for a long moment, then said, "This is good for us." How is that good? Because it proves she's been lying. It proves she's been manipulating the narrative. And if we can get a paternity test to confirm the baby isn't yours, it completely destroys any sympathy she might have had left. She's still pregnant, Catherine. That's a human being. I know, and I'm not saying we use it to be cruel. I'm saying we use it to protect you. If she tries to claim you're the father and comes after you for child support, we need to be ready. She was right. As much as I hated the situation, I had to protect myself. And more importantly, I had to protect Liam and Ella. Catherine filed a motion requesting a court-ordered paternity test. Grace's attorney fought it, but the judge granted it anyway. The results came back 3 weeks later, right before Thanksgiving 2024. The baby wasn't mine. It wasn't Derek's. Based on the timeline Grace had provided to the court, the father was most likely Brad, the tech consultant. But Brad had apparently disappeared. He'd stopped answering Grace's calls, deleted his social media accounts, and vanished like smoke. Grace was left holding the bag, literally. The final divorce hearing was scheduled for early December 2024. By that point, Grace had lost almost everything. The house was mine. The cars were mine. The investment accounts were mine. She'd been ordered to repay the $214,000 she'd stolen, plus interest, which she couldn't afford. Her mother was cooperating with the district attorney to avoid prosecution, which meant turning over all the fraudulent accounts and signing affidavits against her own daughter. Walter had testified on my behalf during one of the hearings. He'd brought his own records showing that he'd had no knowledge of the transfers, and he'd corroborated my story about Grace's increasingly erratic behavior over the past year. Watching him sit in that witness stand and essentially disown his daughter was one of the saddest things I'd ever seen. But he did it because it was the truth. The day of the final hearing, I wore a navy suit and a red tie. Catherine told me to look confident but not smug. "Let the facts speak for themselves," she said. Grace showed up looking exhausted. She was visibly pregnant now, maybe 5 months along, and she wore a loose black dress that looked like she'd bought it at a discount store. Her attorney did his best, arguing that Grace deserved some portion of the assets, that she'd been a stay-at-home mother for years and had contributed to the household in non-financial ways. Judge Hernandez listened patiently, then delivered her ruling. "Mrs. Brooks," she said, "you have committed fraud against your husband. You have violated the trust of your marriage. You have used marital funds for personal gain and to facilitate extramarital affairs. You have demonstrated a pattern of dishonesty. that extends not only to your spouse but to this court. Based on the evidence presented, I am awarding full custody of the minor children to Mr. Brooks. You will be granted visitation rights, supervised every other weekend. As for the division of assets, given your fraudulent activity, I am awarding Mr. Brooks the vast majority of the marital property, including the family home, vehicles, and all financial accounts. You are also ordered to repay the sum of $214,000, plus interest, within 5 years. Failure to do so will result in wage garnishment and possible criminal charges. Grace didn't cry. She just sat there, staring at the table in front of her. Her attorney looked like he wanted to disappear. Catherine squeezed my hand under the table, and just like that, it was over. I walked out of that courtroom a free man, not just legally but emotionally. I'd spent 4 months playing a part, staying calm, building my case, and now I had everything I needed: my kids, my home, and my dignity. Grace left the courthouse alone. No family, no friends, just her and the baby she was carrying. A baby that would be a permanent reminder of everything she'd destroyed. The months that followed were about rebuilding, not just my life, but my kids' lives too. Liam struggled at first. He'd ask questions I didn't always know how to answer. Why did Mom do those things? Is she going to come back? Did we do something wrong? That last one broke my heart every time. I sat him down one Saturday morning in December 2024, just the two of us in the backyard while Ella was at a friend's house, and I told him the truth in terms he could understand. Your mom made some bad choices, I said. Adult choices that had nothing to do with you or your sister. You didn't cause any of this, and neither did Ella. Sometimes people make mistakes that hurt the people they love, but that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. Do you still love her? He asked. I thought about that for a long time. I loved who I thought she was, I finally said, but that person doesn't exist anymore. So no, I don't love her, but I don't hate her either. I just don't feel anything. He nodded like he understood, even though I'm not sure he did. He was only 8, but he was trying, and that was enough. Ella was different. She internalized everything. She stopped talking about Grace altogether, like if she didn't mention her, the whole thing would just go away. Her teacher called me in January 2025 to say Ella had been acting out in class, refusing to participate, drawing dark pictures during art time. I took her to a child therapist named Dr. Sarah Monroe, a kind woman in her 50s who specialized in kids dealing with divorce and family trauma. It took a few sessions, but Ella eventually started opening up. She told Dr. Monroe she was angry at her mom for leaving, but also angry at me for making her go away. Kids don't understand legal battles or fraud. They just know that one parent is gone and the other one is still there. Dr. Monroe helped her work through it, and slowly over the course of months, Ella started coming back to herself. It took months of routines, therapy, and quiet nights before the house felt like a home again. She laughed again. She played with her friends again. She even started asking if we could get a dog. We got a golden retriever puppy in March 2025. Liam named him Scout. Ella loved him instantly, and watching her run around the backyard with that dog, giggling and covered in grass stains, I knew we were going to be okay. Grace's supervised visits were sporadic at best. She'd show up for the first few, sitting in a sterile room at a family services center while a social worker watched her interact with the kids. But by February 2025, she started canceling. Work conflicts, she said. Doctor's appointments. Once, she just didn't show up at all, and I had to explain to Liam and Ella why their mom wasn't coming. After that, they stopped asking. In April 2025, 7 months after Derek's revelation, Grace had the baby. A girl. She named her Sophie. I found out through Walter, who called me one evening and told me in a quiet voice that didn't carry any joy. Grace is struggling, he said. She's living in a 1-bedroom apartment. She's working 2 part-time jobs to make ends meet, and she's trying to raise a baby by herself. I didn't ask if Brad had ever resurfaced. I didn't need to. The answer was obviously no. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. Not because I felt bad for Grace, but because I felt bad for Sophie. That baby didn't ask to be born into this mess. She's asked if you'd consider reducing the repayment amount, Walter continued. She's having trouble making the monthly payments. No, I said firmly. She stole that money, Walter. She doesn't get to negotiate her way out of the consequences. He sighed. I figured you'd say that. I just wanted to ask. How's Janet? I asked, changing the subject. Not great, she's cooperating with the DA, but the shame of it all has been hard on her. She barely leaves the house anymore. I think she's embarrassed to face people. She should be, I said, and I didn't feel bad about saying it. By summer 2025, life had settled into a new normal. I was working again, closing deals, rebuilding my business network. The Phoenix market was hot, and I was busier than ever. But I made sure to be home for dinner every night. I made sure to go to Liam's baseball games and Ella's dance recitals. I made sure they knew that even though their family had changed, they were still loved, still safe. In July 2025, almost exactly a year after that disastrous trip to Charleston, I took the kids on a vacation. Just the three of us. Liam was turning 9 that summer, and Ella was 7. We went to San Diego. We visited the zoo, spent days at the beach, ate fish tacos at a place overlooking the ocean. Liam built an enormous sandcastle. Ella collected seashells. And one evening, as we sat on the sand watching the sunset, Liam turned to me and said, "Dad, I'm glad it's just us." Ella nodded in agreement. Me too. I didn't say anything. I just put my arms around both of them and watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I heard through the grapevine that Grace eventually found a new job, something in retail management. She was still struggling financially, still making payments on the money she owed me, still raising Sophie in that cramped apartment. Kyle, the personal trainer, had moved to California. Derek, the marketing guy, had gotten engaged to someone else. And Brad, the tech consultant, was apparently living in Austin now, completely disconnected from the mess he'd helped create. Grace had gambled everything on a fantasy. She'd thought she could trade her family for something more exciting, more fulfilling, more passionate. But fantasies don't pay the bills. They don't hold you when you're scared. They don't show up when life gets hard. I didn't gloat. I didn't rub her face in it. I didn't need to. The consequences spoke for themselves. One evening in September 2025, as I was putting the kids to bed, Ella looked up at me and asked, "Dad, are you happy?" I thought about it, really thought about it, and I realized that for the first time in years I was, not in a loud, dramatic way, not in a "I just won the lottery" way, but in a quiet, steady way that felt solid, real. "Yeah, sweetheart," I said. "I am." "Good," she said, snuggling into her pillow. "You deserve to be happy." Out of the mouths of babes. Looking back now, I realized that the revenge I'd planned so carefully wasn't really revenge at all. It was justice. It was consequences. Grace had made choices, and those choices had costs. I didn't destroy her life. She did that all by herself. I just made sure she couldn't take mine down with her. People ask me sometimes if I regret how it all went down, if I wish I'd handled it differently. And the answer is no. Could I have confronted her earlier? Sure. Could I have tried marriage counseling or given her a chance to explain herself? Maybe. But the truth is, she'd already made her choice long before that dinner in Charleston. She'd chosen to lie, to cheat, to steal. And when you make those kinds of choices, you don't get to be surprised when the people you hurt refuse to go down quietly. I protected my kids. I protected my assets. I protected my dignity. And in doing so, I taught Liam and Ella a lesson that no amount of money could buy. That actions have consequences, that honesty matters, and that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from someone who doesn't deserve you. Grace tried to take everything from me. My family, my money, my sense of security. But in the end, she took nothing. Because the things that really mattered, the things that couldn't be stolen or transferred or hidden away, were never hers to take. They were mine, and they always had been. Today, in September 2025, Liam is thriving in school. Ella is confident and funny and so full of life it makes my chest hurt sometimes. Scout, the dog, is part of the family now, sprawled out on the couch like he owns the place. And me? I'm doing exactly what I set out to do when this all started, living my life on my own terms, with the people who matter most. I don't think about Grace much anymore. I don't wonder how she's doing or if she's learned her lesson. That's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to the 2 kids sleeping upstairs, to the dog snoring at my feet, and to the quiet, peaceful life we've built together in the aftermath of her choices. And every night when I turn off the lights and lock the doors, I'm reminded of something Catherine told me during one of our first meetings. The best revenge isn't getting even. It's living so well that the people who hurt you become irrelevant. She was right. Grace is irrelevant now, and in September 2025, I'm finally free. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and leave a comment letting me know what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.